A man named Bernardo Sy worked the overnight cleaning crew at a production facility in Culver City, California, for 22 years. He emptied trash cans. He mopped floors. He restocked the supply closets in the corridors that nobody walked through after 6 in the evening. He did these things without complaint and without ceremony, and most of the people who worked in the building did not know his name. One person did. Bernard was 64 years old when the diagnosis came. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctor who delivered the news, a man Bernard described in the way that people describe doctors who tell them hard things, as kind but not soft, told him that with treatment he was looking at 8 to 14 months, and without it perhaps 4 or 5, and that the difference was not only time, but the quality of the time, and that the choice was entirely his own. He chose treatment. He worked for 6 more months, not because he had to, because the work was his, and he was not ready to stop being the person who did it. And then, in the 5th month, on a Thursday evening when the building was nearly empty and the corridors had the particular quiet of a place that is waiting for the next day's noise, he found himself in the hallway outside a rehearsal room on the 2nd floor with his cart and his mop, and a man sitting on the floor against the wall who was not supposed to be there and clearly needed a moment that he had not been able to find anywhere else. The man was Keanu Reeves. They talked for 47 minutes. 6 weeks later, Bernard asked him for the favor. What happened at the funeral, 8 months after that, is the reason his daughter Maya cannot tell this story without stopping at least once, somewhere in the middle, and needing a moment before she can go on. There is a production facility on Jefferson Boulevard in Culver City called Saddleback Stage. Not a famous name. Not a name that appears on industry award programs or entertainment trade covers. 3 main stages, a mill, a wardrobe department, a small commissary, and a network of corridors and supply rooms and production offices that accumulate over decades. The particular texture of a place that has been used for real work by real people for a very long time. Photographs on the walls of productions nobody remembers, and productions everybody does. Scuff marks on the baseboards that predate everyone currently employed there. A commissary coffee machine that has been replaced 4 times, and each replacement has been slightly worse than the one before, and nobody has stopped using it. The overnight cleaning crew arrived at 9 p.m. and was finished by 5:30 in the morning. 5 people, rotating shifts, a supervisor named Vera, who had been running the crew for 11 years, and who managed the schedule and the supply inventory, and the particular human complexity of 5 people working in close proximity through the hours, when human beings are least suited to close proximity. Bernardo Sy had been on Vera's crew for 9 of those 11 years. Before that, he had worked a similar crew at a post-production facility in Burbank for 13 years. And before that, he had worked the evening maintenance shift at an office complex in Inglewood for 3 years after he arrived in Los Angeles from Accra in 1991 with a technical certificate, $240, and the specific kind of determination that arrives when the distance between where you are and where you are trying to go is large enough that you cannot afford to doubt the direction. He had been trying in those early years to build towards something in electrical engineering. He had the training. He had the aptitude. What he did not have was the credential that American employers required, or the connections that made the credential navigable, or the time and money to acquire both, while also keeping the rent paid and sending money home to his mother in Accra on the 1st of every month for 14 years, until she died. He had made a practical decision at 33, the decision to stop treating his maintenance work as temporary and start treating it as the work that it was, and he had never described this decision as a sacrifice, because the word sacrifice implies loss. And what he had built instead was a life that was entirely his own. a daughter he raised alone after her mother left when Maya was 4, an apartment in Limerick Park that he kept with a precision and care that his daughter inherited, and that his colleagues noticed without being able to say exactly what they were noticing, and a way of moving through the building on Jefferson Boulevard at 2 in the morning that was the movement of a man who knew every room and belonged in every one of them. He was not invisible to everyone in that building. He was not invisible to the people who looked. Keanu Reeves had been using Saddleback Stage on and off for 4 years, not for the productions that made the trade papers. For rehearsals. Pre-production work, the particular early-stage work that happens before anything is official, and that requires space and quiet, and the agreement of a facility to let someone come in during the hours when nobody else needs the room. He had an arrangement with the stage manager, a man named Pete, who had known him long enough that the arrangement was informal and reliable, which is the best kind, and he used rehearsal room B on the 2nd floor because the acoustics were better, and because the window at the far end looked out over a parking structure and a strip of sky that changed color in the early morning in a way that was useful, somehow, to whatever he was working on. He had met Bernardo Sai on his 3rd visit. The corridor outside rehearsal room B at 11 at night, Bernard's cart parked near the supply closet, both of them reaching for the door at the same time. Bernard had apologized. Keanu had said there was nothing to apologize for. They had stood in the doorway for a moment in the way that people stand when a brief encounter is deciding whether to become a conversation. It became a conversation. By the 5th visit, it had become the thing that certain conversations become over time in the quiet hours of a building where most people have already gone home. Something honest and unhurried. 2 people talking about their lives the way you talk when neither person is performing anything for anyone. Bernard told him about Accra and the certificate and the 14 years of first-of-the-month transfers, about Maya, who was studying for her pharmacy license exam, and who called him every Sunday at 10 in the morning, regardless of what time zone she was in. A habit that had started when she left for college 12 years ago, and that had not broken once. About the work itself, not as complaint or as pride, but as simple description, the way a craftsman describes a craft, with the attention of someone who has been doing the same thing long enough to know all its textures. Keanu told him things too. Not the public things, the films, the career, the version of his life that was already known. The other things. About loss, about the years that had been very hard, and the specific quality of hardness that does not announce itself but simply settles into the interior of your days until you can no longer remember what the days felt like before it arrived. About what it meant to be in a building late at night, working on something that had not yet found its shape, and the particular combination of peace and terror that came with that. Bernard listened to these things the way he listened to everything, fully, without hurry, with the attention of a person who understands that being listened to is a rarer thing than it should be. He had, at this point, not yet told anyone about the diagnosis. He had known for 3 weeks. The diagnosis had come on a Monday. By Thursday, he had told Maya on the Sunday call, because he was not willing to let the call go by without telling her, and because she would have known something was wrong, and because she deserved the truth. And by the following Thursday, he had told Vera, who had cried in the supply room with the door closed, and then come out with a steady face and asked him what he needed from her, and listened carefully to his answer. He had told no one else. He told Keanu on a Thursday evening in the 5th month. Not because the 5th month was a threshold, or because anything particular had changed. Because it was Thursday, and Keanu was in rehearsal room B, and they were in the corridor at 11:15 with Bernard's cart between them, and the conversation had arrived at a place where the truth was the only thing left to say. He said, "I need to tell you something," he told him. Keanu was quiet for a moment that was long enough to be real, and not so long that it became about himself. He said, "How long have you known?" 5 months. "How is Maya taking it?" He said it the way someone says the name of a person they have heard about enough times to have an image of, not a face, but a shape. The Sunday calls, the pharmacy exam, the way Bernard said her name. Bernard said, "She is doing what Maya does. She is handling it better than she should have to." Keanu said, "And how are you taking it?" Bernard looked at him for a moment. He said, "I am deciding what to do with the time." They stood in the corridor for a while after that, not saying much, in the comfortable way of two people who have been talking long enough that silence is also a form of conversation. 6 weeks later, on a Thursday evening in the 7th month, Bernard asked the favor. He asked it the way he asked most things, directly, without preamble, with the economy of a man who has stopped spending words on things that do not need them. He said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to know that no is a complete answer." Keanu said, "Ask." Bernard said, "When I go, when the time comes, I would like you to come to the service. Not in the front. Not where anyone can see, just to be there. Maya will be the one holding it together for everyone else, and I would like there to be someone in the room who knew me a little, outside of the life she knows me in. Someone who heard some of the real things. I think it would help her. Not in the moment. Later, when she understands who was there." He stopped. He said, "That's the favor." Keanu said, "I'll be there." No pause, no consideration. No qualification about schedules or prior commitments, or what the calendar would look like at an indeterminate future date. Just, "I'll be there." Bernard nodded. He said, "Thank you." He pushed his cart toward the supply closet. Keanu watched him go. He stood in the corridor for a moment. Then he went back into rehearsal room B. Bernard Ose died on a Saturday morning in March at 6:14 a.m. in the apartment in Leimert Park, where he had lived for 17 years. Maya was with him. She had been with him for the last 11 days. She had come as soon as the doctor told her it was close, and she had stayed, sleeping on the couch with a pillow that smelled like his apartment, and waking every time she heard a change in the rhythm of his breathing. He died the way he had lived most of his life, quietly, on his own terms, with his daughter's hand in his. The service was held 9 days later, on a Monday afternoon, at a church on Crenshaw Boulevard called First Abyssinian Baptist. A modest church, wood-floored, 112 seats, with stained glass windows that were not famous, but were beautiful. The kind of beauty that accumulates in a thing that has been made with care, and then used with care for a long time. The flowers were yellow. Maya had chosen them because yellow had been his color, the color of the house in Accra where he grew up, the color he had painted the living room in Leimert Park the 3rd year he lived there. 109 people came. That number requires a sentence. Bernard Ose had spent 22 years cleaning corridors in the overnight hours when most of the building's population was elsewhere. He had not been prominent. He had not been decorated. He had not been the kind of person whose departure from a room would be noticed by the people in it. And yet 109 people came to the church on Crenshaw Boulevard to sit in the yellow light and say goodbye to him. They were Vera and the entire overnight crew, current and former. Going back 11 years. They were neighbors from Leimert Park, who told stories in the reception afterward about the man who shoveled the walk without being asked, and fixed the Hendersons' porch light without being asked, and once drove Mrs. Parrish to her dialysis appointment for 4 months straight without being asked, because her son was having a bad year, and Bernard had a day off, and knew where the dialysis center was. They were Maya's friends, who had grown up hearing his voice in the background of Sunday phone calls. They were people from the church who had known him for 12 and 15 and 20 years, and in the second to last row on the left side of the church, in a dark jacket and dark trousers, not drawing attention and not receiving it, was the man he had asked. Maya had been told, in the week between the death and the service, by the stage manager Pete, who had been told by someone who had noticed Keanu's visits to Saddleback, and who had put together enough of the picture to make a call. Pete had said only that there was a possibility someone would come whom she might not be expecting, and that her father had arranged it, and that was all he knew. She had not known what to do with this information. She had put it in the part of herself that was already holding more than it could hold, and focused on the 108 things that required her immediate attention. She saw him when she stood at the lectern to speak. She had prepared remarks. She had written them on the same night she chose the flowers, sitting at his kitchen table with his handwriting on the pad of paper she had found in the drawer, because she needed something of him in her hands while she worked. The remarks were good. They were specific and true and full of the particular details that make a person present in a room even after they are gone. The Sunday calls, the dialysis runs, the yellow paint, the first of the month transfers, the way he held a mop with the same grip he had used the first day and the last day, because the right way to hold a mop was the right way, and that did not change. She spoke for 11 minutes. She did not stop once. She was, as Bernard had predicted, holding it together for everyone else. But at the end, at the last line of the prepared remarks, she looked up from the paper, and her eyes found the second to last row on the left. And she held that for a moment. And what passed between them was not something that can be described in language without losing the specific thing that it was. She said, to the room, not to him specifically, but to the room that included him. He told me once that the best thing a person could do was notice the people that the world had decided not to notice. I think he spent 64 years doing exactly that. And I know, that some of those people noticed him back. She stepped down from the lectern. The church was very quiet. Nobody clapped. Not because it wasn't right, but because the silence was. He left before the reception. He had told Pete to tell her beforehand that he would need to leave at the service's end, and that he was sorry he would not be at the reception, and that he hoped she would understand. He did not want the afternoon to become about his presence rather than her father's. The afternoon belonged to Bernard. He walked out of First Abyssinian Baptist Church into the March light, got into the car he had parked 3 blocks away, the same dark gray hoodie, the same worn jeans, the boots with the scuff on the left toe, and sat for a moment before starting the engine. He had kept the favor. That was all it had been. He thought about the corridor on the second floor of Saddleback Stage on a Thursday night in October, and the cart with the mop, and the man who had stopped to talk when he did not have to stop, and had told the truth when he did not have to tell it, and had asked for one small thing when he could have asked for nothing. He started the engine and drove. Maya Osei passed her pharmacy licensing exam 6 weeks after the service. She had been studying for it while sitting with her father in the last 11 days, working through the practice problems in the early mornings when he was still sleeping, because he had told her specifically not to stop, and she was not going to stop. She had told him she passed on the phone, the way she had told him everything on the phone for 12 years. And then she had sat in her apartment in the particular quiet of a person who has just reached the other end of something enormous and does not yet know what to do with the fact of having gotten there. She went to work. She built her career the way he had built his, steadily, without ceremony, with her full attention on the work itself. She is a pharmacist now at a clinic in Inglewood, 2 miles from where her father grew up in Los Angeles, and she has been there for 3 years. She tells the story of the corridor sometimes, of the Thursday evenings and the 47 minutes and the favor. She does not tell it to everyone. She tells it to people who are at the particular juncture in their own lives where the story has something to offer. People who are losing someone, or who feel invisible in their work, or who need to be reminded that being noticed is not the same as being famous, and that the two things have very little to do with each other. She always tells it the same way, starting with the mop, ending with the second to last row. She always stops once, somewhere in the middle. And then she goes on. Vera retired from the overnight crew at Saddleback Stage 18 months after Bernard died. At her retirement gathering, held in the commissary, with the bad coffee and a cake from the bakery 2 blocks over that Maya had ordered and had delivered, she gave a short speech that ended with a story about a man she had worked with for 9 years who had taught her, without ever meaning to teach anyone anything, what it looks like to do a job with complete and total respect for the job. She said that she had tried, in the 18 months since he had been gone, to do her own job the way he had done his. She said she had not always managed it. She said she was going to keep trying. Pete, the stage manager, had a plaque put up in the corridor outside rehearsal room B on the 2nd floor of Saddleback Stage. He had not asked permission from the facility management to put it there. He had simply put it there, in the space between the supply closet door and the corner, at a height where a person walking with a cart would see it. It said, Bernardo Sai, 22 years. He knew every room. That is all it said. It has been there for 4 years and no one has taken it down. I have been trying to understand since I first heard this story what it is that I keep returning to. It is not the funeral, though the funeral is the moment that lives longest in the chest. It is not the favor itself, or the answer to the favor, which was immediate and kept. It is the Thursday evenings. The 47 minutes in the corridor outside rehearsal room B, the conversations that happened there for months before anyone asked anything of anyone. The conversations that had no purpose beyond themselves, that were not building toward a favor or a transaction or a story that would later be told to anyone. Just 2 people in a hallway at 11 at night, talking about the real things, which are always available and almost never spoken. Bernard asked for one thing. He got it. But I keep thinking about what he gave first, in those corridors, over those months, without ever calling it a gift, without expecting anything in return, without even being sure, I suspect, that any of it would be remembered. He noticed. And he showed up for the noticing. And someone noticed back. I do not know if I do that, not consistently, not the way he did, which appeared to be always, and with his whole attention. There are corridors in my own life where I have kept walking when I could have stopped, where I have held the real things back because the hour was wrong, or the timing was awkward, or I told myself the other person was probably fine. I think about that more than I used to. I think maybe that is what this story is actually for. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known and often attested practice of showing up for people fully, in small moments and large ones, without keeping score. Drop a comment and tell me what stayed with you, the moment you keep returning to. Share this with someone who might need to hear it today. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. See you in the next one.